So I put this class together a little differently than any other acupressure class that I have seen. In most acupressure classes, they cover some basic 5-element or 5-phase theory, and then they throw a bunch of acupuncture points at you to try to remember, oh, this is Hagu or large intestine 4, and it's good for headaches and tooth pain, and stomach 36 is good for fatigue, and you get 50 points out of the class or something, and you leave and 2 of them might stick in your head. The rest of it is just garbled. So when I made this class, I purposefully avoided you having to memorize any points. We won't be using point names. I may use them, but we won't be trying to learn specific acupressure points. Instead, we're going to focus on what we call the visceral fields. Some folks call it channel trajectory. These are the areas of the body that are governed or influenced by each of the channel systems. And I'm going to give you cheat sheets, they're all in your handout, of where these are. And then we're going to talk about how they're connected and 5 ways that you can use different parts of the body to treat other parts of the body with acupressure. So we're going to talk about finding tender points, what they call Asher points in Chinese medicine. Instead of having to find a location specific to a textbook, you're going to find the point that's effective for the person on your table by feel. And that, I think, is much more manageable and digestible in a single day class. There's still more information than your brain can absorb in a 1 7-hour day class, but that's why the charts are in the handout, because you can use them as reference. If the pictures in the handouts confuse you, don't worry. I'm going to sort of show you the most important ones to hang on to. You'll see that actually one of them that comes up pretty quick, I have laminated as an easy, quick reference. Eventually you get where you kind of don't need it, but at first, being able to reference it really easily is nice. I actually had this with some of that blue sticky putty on the wall in my treatment room early on in my practice. So we're also going to focus more on treating pain, musculoskeletal issues, than we are internal medicine issues. Doesn't mean that you can't use this to treat internal medicine issues. And we'll talk about sort of what symptoms are connected a little bit with each of the channels or channel systems. But most body work is done focusing on the external body, the muscles and the bones and the joints. It's not very common for people to come in and say, I have IBS, is there something you can do for me? Even though you can. Massage is wonderful for IBS, even without acupressure. It's just not something most people think about. So that'll be a little less useful perhaps than I have shoulder pain and how can I treat that. So our basic goals for this class are to cover all of those channel pathways or trajectories and learn about what tissues are associated with each system, learn what an Asher point is and how to find them, and learn about those connections between them. Techniques for stimulating points is something that you all already know how to do, your body workers, but we'll talk about a couple other tools and ways that you might stimulate specific points. So that'll be at the very end. These pictures of channels didn't actually come from this book, but the sort of go-to standard book for channel and point information is called A Manual of Acupuncture by Peter Dedman. It's used by every single acupuncture school in the country. So what we're going to do is walk through each of these channels. I'll talk about its sort of area of influence, talk about some of the conditions you would see briefly, and then what we'll do is actually palpate each of these channels on our partner. So our first channel that we're covering is the lung channel, and we are going to follow these in order. The order that we are using, they call the clock, the Chinese clock order. Basically, each of these systems is connected to a 2-hour block of time where the Chinese say it's most active. The order doesn't really matter, except when we talk about one of those 5 systems, or 2 of them technically, where they're at on the clock is how we know which ones we're going to use. So being familiar with the order is helpful. If you forget it, don't worry. It's in your book like 5 times, and it's on the cheat sheet. So if you have the cheat sheet, you're good. It took me a long time to actually get the order in my head. If you don't use it, it'll take you even longer. So the first channel is the lung channel. All of these have an organ association, but in reality, the organ is only a small part of the system. The Chinese do not call this the lung channel. They call it the hand tai-yin channel. And that's up here. It's on your handout for this channel. The Chinese look at the body in layers. There's 6 layers to the body. Each layer is either yin or yang. So there's 3 yin and 3 yang. And they're connected based on their level in the body as well. And that'll come to play in one of our 5 systems a little later as well. So the lung channel, or the hand tai-yin channel, as its name implies, is on the arm or hand. It actually, all of the channels originate internally and express onto the outside of the body. But unless you're doing an autopsy, you're probably not going to be palpating the internal paths of these. And I'm not going to let you dig around in my guts for this one. So we'll talk about the external pathway. For the lung, it really erupts or manifests externally in the little anterior triangle between the deltoid and the pectoralis. So lung 1 and 2, which you can see up here, are right at the edge of pec, right? Pec major. But this whole anterior corner of the shoulder is really governed by the lung, and that includes the clavicle itself. And you can see the sinew channel, which is a slightly different representation they use in Chinese medicine, has these binding sites, these darker areas. So there's one at the wrist, there's one at the elbow, and then there's one on the clavicle. And those are areas that the channel is connected with. So the lung channel governs this anterior corner of the shoulder, and then it's going to run down the arm and end up at the thumb. So it governs this lateral portion of biceps, it governs the lateral portion of the cubital crease, it governs along the radius, essentially through the forearm, and the entire palmar surface of the thumb and thenar eminence are considered to be the lung channel. In Chinese medicine, the lungs' functions are very similar to Western medicine. They think about it as drawing out clear qi or clear energy or function, whatever your preferred translation is for qi, from the air to mix with the nutrition from our food and create sustenance, essentially. So the lung is responsible for breathing. And, they use different words for it. So issues with asthma, issues with bronchitis, COPD, emphysema, all of those sort of things are tied to the lung. But they don't stop with just those direct physical functions. So the lung is also what's called the metal phase of the body. That metal phase means that it's responsible for our sense of self and our ability to project or show. They talk about our voice, but it's basically being able to project your ideas and be willing to put yourself out there. Metal is also associated with sadness in Chinese medicine. So any sort of dysfunction where there is some grief or sadness, that would be a lung or its pair we'll get to next, the large intestine.